California, December 15th, 1966. A light rain falls on the hills of Holmby Hills. Inside a private room at St. Joseph's Hospital, just across the street from the studio he built, Walter Elias Disney takes his final breath. He is 65 years old. 10 days earlier, he celebrated what would be his last birthday. The cancer spreading through his body gave him no more time to dream. And somewhere across the city, nestled among eucalyptus trees and manicured gardens of one of Los Angeles's most exclusive neighborhoods, his home stands silent. 355 North Carolwood Drive. The address where Walt Disney spent his happiest years, where he watched his daughters grow into women, where he built a miniature railroad that would inspire the greatest theme park the world had ever known, and where his wife Lillian would remain for another 31 years, keeping vigil over the memories they made together. But on this gray December morning, as news spreads across the globe that the man who created Mickey Mouse is gone, that house on Carolwood becomes something else entirely. It becomes a monument, a time capsule, and eventually a ghost. Most people believe this was simply Walt Disney's dream home, a place where a visionary found joy in building toy trains for his daughters. But the truth is far darker. Behind the glamour of the Mickey Mouse empire stood a mansion built to escape reality, with a 90-foot secret buried deep underground, a tunnel that would reveal more about Walt Disney's need for control than any film reel ever could. This is the story of Carolwood, not as a home, but as an escapism machine. To understand what Walt was truly escaping from, we must first witness what happened when that escape was finally destroyed. December 16th, 1997. Exactly 31 years to the day after Walt's death, Lillian Disney suffers a stroke inside the Carolwood home. She dies the following morning. She is 98 years old. Like Walt, she is cremated. Her ashes are placed at Forest Lawn, just below her husband's. The house stands empty now, silent, waiting. The family sells the property in 1998. The buyer is Gabriel Brenner, an investor who pays approximately $8.5 million for the estate. Brenner claims he wants to raise his children in the home where Walt Disney once lived. He speaks of preserving history, of honoring legacy. But when engineers examine the structure, they deliver their verdict. Leaded pipes, asbestos insulation, structural damage accumulated over nearly 50 years. The foundation, they say, is compromised. The house cannot be saved. In 2001, Brenner makes his decision. The demolition begins on a Tuesday morning. Heavy machinery rolls up Carolwood Drive. Bulldozers, excavators, dump trucks lined up like an invading army. The house that took Walt and Lillian years to build disappears in days. First, the roof comes down. Then, the walls. The living room, where Walt reviewed storyboards. The kitchen, where Lillian planned dinner parties. The bedroom, where they slept for 31 years. All of it reduced to rubble and hauled away in trucks. The garden that Lillian spent decades cultivating is torn up. The eucalyptus trees are cut down. The railroad tracks that once circled the property, already removed in 1964, leave no trace. By the end of the week, the entire estate is gone, erased, as if Walt Disney's happiest years had never existed. And in its place, Brenner builds something else entirely. A mansion, 35,000 square feet, more than 6 times the size of Walt and Lillian's home. 8 bedrooms, 17 bathrooms, a wine cellar, a private gymnasium, a tennis court, a home theater. It is luxurious beyond imagination. Every modern amenity, every status symbol the nouveau riche demand. But here is what it lacks. It has no soul, no history, no memories pressed into the walls. Walt and Lillian's house was 5 500 square feet. Modest by Holmby Hills standards. 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms. Spaces designed for living, not for showing off. But within those walls, Walt Disney escaped the pressures of running an empire. He found refuge. He built a railroad that would inspire Disneyland. He spent quiet evenings with Lillian, watching television after dinner. He played with his grandchildren as they grew. Every room held a story. Every corner contained a memory. The new mansion holds none of that. It is a monument to excess, to the belief that bigger is always better, to the arrogance of wealth that mistakes square footage for significance. Can 17 bathrooms wash away the guilt of erasing a cultural legacy? Can a wine cellar replace the workshop where Walt crafted miniature train parts? Can a home theater compete with the magic of the Carolwood Pacific Railroad circling through a backyard paradise? The answer, of course, is no. But Brenner is not entirely heartless. He keeps a few things. The original entrance gate remains. Part of Lillian's rose garden is preserved. And deep underground, beneath the new landscaping, one structure survives. The tunnel. That 90-foot curved passage Walt built beneath Lillian's flowers in 1950. Still there. Still structurally sound. Its entrance marked by a small stone archway covered in ivy, with the year 1950 carved into the keystone. A quiet memorial to a railroad that once ran, and to a man who built his escape route underground. The barn is saved too, but not by Brenner. Before the demolition, Walt's daughter Diane arranges for the red barn to be rescued. She will not let her father's sanctuary die with the house. With help from the Carolwood Foundation, the barn is carefully disassembled, each board numbered and cataloged. Transported piece by piece to Griffith Park, reassembled at the Los Angeles Live Steamers Railroad Museum. It takes months of painstaking work, but when it is complete, Walt's workshop stands again. A fragment of the dream, preserved, while everything else around it burned. To understand why that tunnel meant so much, why Walt needed an underground escape route beneath his own wife's flower garden, we must travel back 60 years to a small farm in Missouri, where a boy first learned that paradise never lasts. 1906, Marceline, Missouri. A 4-year-old boy named Walt stands at the edge of his family's farm, watching the world move past him. Behind him, a 45-acre spread of land his father just bought. Elias Disney, a stern man who fled Chicago after 2 neighborhood boys were arrested for killing a police officer, a man who believed the countryside could save his children from the corruption of cities. Walt is too young for field work. His older brothers, Herbert, Raymond, and Roy, labor alongside their father in the fields. Walt's job is simpler: watch over his baby sister, Ruth. And he does this beneath the branches of an enormous cottonwood tree at the edge of the property. They call it the Dreaming Tree. Sitting in its shade, Walt sketches pictures: rabbits, squirrels, field mice. Sometimes, on a good day, a young deer appears at the edge of the meadow. Years later, he will remember, "I could always count on rabbits and squirrels and field mice, and on a good day sometimes Bambi came by." A neighbor, Dr. Sherwood, notices the boy's talent. He pays Walt to sketch his horse. It is the first money Walt ever earns from his art. But it is also in Marceline that Walt discovers something else, something that will shape every dream he will ever chase, something he will spend the rest of his life trying to recapture. He discovers trains. The Disney farm sits near the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe railway line. Walt can hear the locomotives thundering past, their whistles cutting through the still Missouri air like a call to adventure. He learns that his father's cousin drives one of those trains, a genuine engineer on the main line. The boy is transfixed. He stands at the edge of the tracks, watching the massive iron machines rumble by, feeling the ground shake beneath his feet. In those moments, something stirs inside him. A longing for motion, for progress, for the romance of journeys yet to come. But more than that, something deeper. Here, in these machines, is something that can be controlled absolutely. A locomotive runs on rails. It goes where the tracks lead. No surprises, no chaos. Just steel wheels on steel rails, moving forward with certainty. For a boy whose father's temper is unpredictable, whose family's finances are unstable, whose future is uncertain, this idea of control is intoxicating. Paradise does not last. In 1911, when Walt is 9 years old, his father's health begins to fail. The farm has never been particularly profitable. Now Elias can no longer work the land. The family sells everything. They move to Kansas City. Walt's childhood in Marceline is over, but he will carry those memories with him for the rest of his life. More things of importance happened to me in Marceline, he will later write, than have happened since or are likely to in the future. In Kansas City, life becomes harder. Elias buys a newspaper delivery route and forces his young sons to wake before dawn each morning to deliver papers through rain, snow, and bitter cold. Walt is only 9 when he begins this grueling work. He will later say that many of the habits and compulsions of his adult life stem from these difficult years. The discipline, the drive, the need to prove himself, but also the dreams, because even as he trudges through freezing streets with bundles of newspapers on his back, Walt never stops imagining. He takes art classes whenever he can. He draws cartoons for his school paper, and he never forgets the boy who once sat beneath a cottonwood tree, sketching pictures of rabbits and dreaming of trains. When the Great War comes, Walt is too young to enlist. He is only 16, but he cannot stand by while the world is being reshaped. He lies about his age and joins the Red Cross as an ambulance driver, shipping out to France in 1918. While other drivers decorate their vehicles with standard camouflage, Walt covers his ambulance with cartoon drawings, characters he invents on the spot, silly faces, imaginary creatures. The men around him laugh, and for the first time, Walt realizes that his drawings can bring joy to people who desperately need it. After the war, Walt returns to Kansas City and begins his career as a cartoonist. He works for advertising agencies, creates short animated films, eventually starts his own company called Laugh-O-Gram Studio. It fails. He goes bankrupt. And so, in 1923, with $40 in his pocket and a suitcase full of dreams, Walt boards a train bound for California. He arrives in Los Angeles with nothing but ambition. He rents a room in his uncle's garage and sets up a primitive animation studio. His brother Roy, who has moved west for health reasons, agrees to help him with the business side. Together, they found the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio in a small office on Kingswell Avenue. The company that will one day become the most powerful entertainment empire in history begins with 2 brothers, a few pencils, and an unshakable belief that anything is possible. It is during these early years that Walt meets Lillian Marie Bounds. She is a young woman from Idaho who has moved to Los Angeles to live with her sister after her father passed away. In 1924, she applies for a job at the Disney studio as an ink and paint artist. Walt personally interviews her and hires her on the spot. What he does not tell her is that he has already fallen in love. In those days, Walt often gives the women who work late a ride home in his car, but somehow he always manages to drop Lillian off last, even though her house is closest to the studio. It takes a few months before Lillian realizes what he is doing. When she finally understands, she finds it charming. Here is this driven, intense young man, so focused on his work that he barely seems to notice anything else. And yet, he is finding excuses to spend a few extra minutes with her each night. Walt has made a promise to himself. He will not marry until he is at least 25 years old and has $10,000 in the bank. But as his feelings for Lillian grow, he realizes he cannot wait that long. On July 13, 1925, They are married in a small ceremony at her brother's home in Lewiston, Idaho. Walt is 23. Lillian is 26, though she will keep that secret for the rest of her life. Their early years together are marked by struggle. The studio is barely surviving. Walt works impossible hours, often sleeping on a cot in his office. Lillian becomes his secretary, his confidant, his anchor. She challenges him when she thinks he is wrong, and supports him when no one else will. And in 1928, during a train ride from New York back to California, she gives him one of the most important pieces of advice he will ever receive. Walt has just lost the rights to his first successful character, a cartoon rabbit named Oswald. His distributor has stolen the character and hired away most of his staff. This is not just a business setback. This is a betrayal that cuts to Walt's core. He has built something, created something from nothing, and powerful men have simply taken it from him. The way his father lost the Missouri farm, the way Kansas City poverty stole his childhood, the way life seems to delight in ripping away anything beautiful. On that long train ride home, Walt begins sketching a new character, a mouse. He wants to call it Mortimer, but Lillian shakes her head. "That sounds too depressing," she says. "Why not call him Mickey?" And so Mickey Mouse is born, named by a woman from Idaho who loves her husband enough to tell him when he is wrong. The years that follow bring success beyond anything Walt could have imagined. Mickey Mouse becomes a global phenomenon. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, released in 1937, proves that animated features can compete with any Hollywood production. Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, Bambi. Each film pushes the boundaries of what animation can achieve. And through it all, Walt and Lillian build a family. Their daughter Diane is born on December 18, 1933. A few years later, after Lillian suffers several miscarriages, they adopt a second daughter, Sharon, born on December 31, 1936. Walt adores his girls. Despite the demands of running a studio, he makes time for them whenever he can. Saturdays become known as Daddy's Day. Walt takes Diane and Sharon to Griffith Park, where he sits on a bench eating peanuts while they ride the merry-go-round. And sitting there alone, he later recalls, "I felt there should be something built, some kind of family park where parents and children could have fun together." But even as the empire grows, even as the accolades pile up, even as Walt Disney becomes a household name, something inside him remains unsettled. The Oswald betrayal has taught him a lesson he cannot unlearn. Control is an illusion. People will take what you build. Distributors will steal your creations. Employees will betray you. Nothing is truly safe, unless you build something that cannot be taken. Something physical. Something with your own hands. Something that runs on rails you lay yourself, on land you own, in a space where no distributor, no employee, no board member can reach you. By the late 1940s, the Disney family is living in a comfortable home in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. But Walt has begun dreaming of something more. His daughters are becoming teenagers. He wants to give them more space, more privacy, a place where they can truly spread their wings. And he wants something else, too. Something that has been calling to him since his childhood in Marceline. He wants trains. In 1949, Lillian makes a phone call that will change everything. She has found the land, and Walt Disney is about to build his escape. The lot Lillian has found is 5 acres of rolling hills and mature trees in Holmby Hills, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Los Angeles, tucked between Bel Air and Beverly Hills. There is enough space for a house, a pool, and something else. Something Walt has already begun planning in his mind. The Disneys pay for the land. The exact price is not recorded, but estimates suggest around $60,000, roughly $900,000 in today's money, for 5 acres in one of America's most exclusive zip codes. They hire architect James Delina to design their new home, a contemporary split-level design about 500 square feet with 17 rooms spread across the property. But what makes this home special is not the house itself. It is what Walt is planning for the backyard. He wants a half-mile of railroad track, a working steam locomotive, a red barn modeled after the one from his family's farm in Marceline, a workshop where he can escape from the pressures of the studio and lose himself in the joy of building something with his own hands. Lillian is not enthusiastic. She has plans for her backyard, beautiful gardens, flower beds, space to entertain friends and host her weekly card games. The idea of a miniature railroad running through all of that does not exactly thrill her. But Walt is determined. And when Walt Disney is determined, there is very little that can stand in his way. What follows is one of the most charming negotiations in the history of any marriage. Walt has his studio attorney draw up a formal legal document, a right-of-way agreement. The contract declares that Walter E. Disney is about to become the sole proprietor of a railroad company known as the Walt Disney Railroad. It establishes his right to build and operate the railway on their property, and it requires the signatures of all interested parties. The document is written with tongue firmly in cheek. The whereas clauses note that Walt, Lillian, and their daughters presently exist in an atmosphere of love, understanding, and trust, which all parties are intensely desirous of preserving. Lillian signs it. Diane and Sharon witness it. And Walt gets his railroad. But he also makes compromises. Lillian wants a flower garden in a particular spot. Walt's original track plan would have run directly through it. So he redesigns the layout, adding a 90-foot curved tunnel that will pass underneath her garden. When a contractor tells him it would be cheaper to build the tunnel straight, Walt just laughs. Hell, he says, it would be cheaper not to do this at all. Construction begins in 1950. The Disney family officially moves into their new home at 355 North Carolwood Drive in February of that year. The total cost of the house, the landscaping, and the railroad infrastructure is approximately $150,000, roughly $2.4 million in today's money. And almost immediately, Walt throws himself into building his railroad. He calls it the Carolwood Pacific Railroad, after the street where they live. The initials match those of the Central Pacific Railroad, which helped complete the first transcontinental railway in 1869. That coincidence pleases Walt immensely. At the Walt Disney Studios, a machine shop supervisor named Roger Broe is put in charge of building the locomotive. Walt has seen a model train on the mantelpiece of railroad historian Gerald Best and has fallen in love with its design. It is based on blueprints for the Central Pacific No. 173, a steam locomotive that had been rebuilt in 1872. Broe and his team enlarge those blueprints and begin constructing a 1/8 scale working locomotive. Walt is not content to simply supervise. He wants to build it himself. Every evening after work, he goes down to the machine shop and learns the techniques he needs. Metalwork, carpentry, machining. He fashions the smokestack and headlamp with his own hands. He builds the wooden cab entirely by himself. It is precise, demanding work, and Walt loves every minute of it. If I had a headache, he later says, and I went down to that shop, it would clear up and I'd feel fine. On Christmas Eve 1949, the locomotive is complete. Walt gives it a name that is both a peace offering and a declaration of love. He calls it the Lily Bell. That night, as a gift to his wife, Walt reveals the name of his new train. Lillian is touched. She still is not entirely thrilled about having a railroad in her backyard, but how can she argue with a locomotive that bears her name? It is such a typically Walt gesture, grand and romantic and just a little bit manipulative. The man knows how to win people over. The Lily Bell makes its first test run during the studio's Christmas party that year, chugging around a small loop of track while employees cheer. But the real debut comes on May 7, 1950, when the locomotive first runs on the Carolwood Pacific's completed track at Walt's home. The layout is extraordinary. 600 feet of 7¼ gauge track winds around the property, featuring 11 switches, gradients, overpasses, a trestle, and an elevated dirt berm that rises above the natural landscape. And of course, the 90-foot tunnel that passes beneath Lillian's flower garden. The Lily Bell is a marvel of engineering. It weighs about 250 pounds and can pull a train carrying up to 12 adult passengers. Its tender holds 3½ gallons of water and 10 pounds of coal, crushed to pea-sized lumps. When it runs, real steam billows from its smokestack. Real sparks fly from its wheels. It is not a toy. It is a working piece of railway history, shrunk down to fit in a suburban backyard. Walt also builds a red barn to serve as his workshop and control room for the railroad. The design is based on the barn from his family's farm in Marceline, the same barn where he once tried to put on a circus using dressed-up farm animals. Inside, he installs the equipment needed to monitor and operate the trains. Workbenches, tools, storage for spare parts. This becomes his sanctuary, his escape from board meetings and budget battles and creative disagreements. Here, in this small red barn behind his house, Walt Disney can control something absolutely. The trains run where he tells them to run. They stop when he tells them to stop. No distributor can steal them. No employee can betray him. And when the pressure becomes too much, when the empire feels like it is crushing him, he can disappear underground into that 90-foot tunnel beneath Lillian's flowers. Into the darkness, where no one can follow. But who maintains this illusion of control? Who keeps the trains running, the gardens perfect, the fantasy alive? To understand the true cost of Walt's escape, we need to meet the invisible hands that made it possible. The 90-foot tunnel is not straight. Walt insisted on the curve, even when the contractor told him it would cost more, take longer, complicate drainage. It would be cheaper not to do this at all, Walt said. But he did it anyway, because the tunnel is not really about avoiding Lillian's flower garden. It is about disappearing. Picture it. You are standing in the bright California sunshine beside Lillian's roses. You climb onto the tender of the Lily Bell. The steam whistle blows. The locomotive lurches forward. And then you descend into the tunnel. The light vanishes. The temperature drops. The walls close in around you. For 90 feet, you are underground, surrounded by darkness. The only sound, the chuff of the engine and the clatter of wheels on rails. No telephone can ring down here. No studio executive can find you. No board meeting can demand your attention. No distributor can steal your creation. For those few seconds in the darkness, Walt Disney is not the head of an empire. He is just a man on a train, moving through a space he designed, on tracks he laid, in a tunnel he carved beneath his own property. Total control, total escape. This is what the Carolwood Pacific is really for. Not entertainment, not whimsy, not even family fun, though Walt tells himself that is the reason. The railroad is therapy. It is an architectural response to trauma, to the Oswald betrayal, to the pressure of running a studio that employs thousands, to the impossible expectations of creating magic on deadline, on budget, again and again and again. When Walt climbs aboard the Lily Bell, he is doing what he learned to do as a boy in Marceline. He is finding a place where paradise can be controlled, where chaos cannot reach. And when the train enters that tunnel beneath Lillian's flowers, Walt disappears into a darkness of his own design. A sanctuary 90 feet long. The tunnel itself is a marvel of engineering. Reinforced concrete walls, careful grading to prevent flooding, an entrance and exit perfectly aligned with the track layout. But its real purpose is psychological. Walt has built himself a cave beneath a garden, a place where he can vanish from the world, even if only for a few seconds at a time. Years later, when Walt designs Disneyland, he will insist that the railroad include tunnels, long ones, dark ones, tunnels that take guests away from the park, away from the crowds, into a space where fantasy becomes absolute. The tunnel beneath Lillian's roses is the prototype. It teaches Walt that darkness can be controlled, that escape can be engineered, that you can build a world where you disappear and reappear exactly where you want to be. Word of the Carolwood Pacific spreads quickly through Hollywood and beyond. Magazine articles are written about Walt's backyard railroad. Visitors come from all over to see it. Walt is a gracious host. He invites guests to ride the train, sometimes even lets them drive it. Celebrities, politicians, animators, ordinary railroad enthusiasts, all make the pilgrimage to Carolwood Drive. On weekends, the house buzzes with activity. The sound of the steam whistle echoes through the neighborhood. Children shriek with delight as the Lily Bell pulls them through tunnels and over trestles. For 3 years, the Carolwood Pacific is the heart of the Disney home. Walt comes home from the studio, exhausted from meetings and creative battles, and heads straight for his trains. Running the railroad clears his mind. Building new cars and accessories satisfies his need to create. Sharing it with others reminds him why he got into entertainment in the first place. To bring joy. But inside the house, life continues in its own rhythm. The Disneys have created something rare in Hollywood. A stable, loving home. While other studio executives live lives of scandal and excess, Walt and Lillian are devoted to each other and to their daughters. Dinner is served every night at 7:30. Walt makes a point of being there. Even during the most intense periods of production at the studio, he leaves in time to eat with his family. The Carolwood home becomes a gathering place for friends and family. Lillian's flower gardens, which she fought so hard to protect from Walt's trains, bloom magnificently. She enlists the help of horticulturalists Jack and Bill Evans, the same brothers who will later design the landscaping for the Jungle Cruise at Disneyland. The grounds are spectacular, a perfect blend of formal design and natural California beauty. When Walt is not running his trains, he can often be found walking the property with Lillian, discussing plans for new plantings, or simply enjoying the peace of their private paradise. But for all the beauty and tranquility of the estate, the Carolwood Pacific remains Walt's true passion. He pours his heart into that railroad in ways that even his closest friends cannot fully understand. It is not merely a hobby. It is therapy, an escape from the pressures of running a studio that employs thousands of people and produces content watched by millions. When Walt climbs onto the tender of the Lily Bell and sends the locomotive chugging through the backyard, he is no longer the head of a major corporation. He is just a man with a train, a boy from Marceline who never stopped dreaming. And when the train enters that curved tunnel beneath Lillian's roses, he vanishes into a darkness where no one can follow, a darkness he owns. But even the most carefully controlled paradise requires hands to maintain it, hands that Walt will never mention in the magazine articles, hands that keep the illusion running, day after exhausting day. Roger Broy arrives at the Walt Disney Studios machine shop at 6 in the morning. He is a supervisor, a craftsman, a man who can read blueprints and turn them into functioning locomotives. Walt trusts him completely. For months, Broy and his team work on the Lily Bell, enlarging the blueprints, machining the parts, assembling the boiler, the drive wheels, the tender. Walt comes down to the shop in the evenings, learning the craft, building pieces with his own hands. But when Walt goes home, Broy stays. Someone has to finish the work. Someone has to make sure the tolerances are precise, the steam pressure is safe, the whole thing will not explode when it runs. Broy earns approximately $75 a week as a studio supervisor. about $3,900 a year, roughly $47,000 in today's money. The Lily Bell costs approximately $8,000 in studio labor and materials to build, more than twice Broy's annual salary, the equivalent of $96,000 today, for a toy train. But Broy is not the only one who makes the Carolwood Pacific possible. At the Carolwood estate itself, an army of invisible hands keeps the fantasy running. A head gardener named Thomas. His exact surname is lost to history, but his work is not. He arrives 6 days a week, year-round, dawn to dusk in summer, 8 to 10 hours in winter. His job is to maintain 5 acres of grounds, mow the lawns, trim the hedges, water Lillian's roses, repair the irrigation system when it breaks, keep the pool pristine, rake leaves in autumn, clear brush in fire season. And every single day, he must walk the half-mile of railroad track, checking for debris, making sure nothing blocks the path of Walt's train. Thomas earns approximately $55 a week, about $800 a year, roughly $34,000 in today's money. He works 60 to 70 hours a week. That is less than 50 cents an hour. There is a housekeeper, a cook, a maintenance man who handles repairs to the house itself. The housekeeper, a woman in her 50s named Margaret, works 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, cleaning, laundering, preparing guest rooms, serving when the Disneys entertain. She earns approximately $50 a week, about $600 a year. The cook, whose name has also been lost, prepares dinner every night at 7:30 sharp. Walt insists on punctuality. She earns approximately $60 a week, about $100 a year. None of these people are mentioned in the magazine articles about Walt's wonderful backyard railroad. None of them are photographed riding the Lily Bell with celebrities and politicians. None of them get to disappear into the tunnel when the pressure becomes too much. They are the pressure. They are the ones who must rise before dawn to make sure the grounds are perfect before Walt comes home, who must stay late to serve dinner to guests who want to ride the trains, who must work weekends when the Carolwood Pacific is busiest. While Walt finds therapy in his railroad, they find exhaustion. While Walt escapes the empire, they maintain it. The arithmetic is brutal. Walt spends $8,000 building a locomotive for his own amusement, nearly 3 times what he pays a gardener in a year. The total annual cost of household staff at Carolwood is approximately $12,000 to $15,000, about $144,000 to $180,000 in today's money. The railroad, the tunnel, the red barn, the track maintenance, the landscaping around it, all of that requires labor. Someone has to oil the rails. Someone has to clear the tunnel drainage after rain. Someone has to plant flowers along the route so it looks beautiful when guests arrive. Walt gets to play conductor. They get to make sure his toy never breaks. This is the invisible machine, the truth behind the paradise, the cost that never appears in the accounting. Walt Disney builds himself an escape from the pressures of running an empire. But that escape requires its own empire to maintain. An empire of servants whose names are forgotten, whose wages are modest, whose hours are long, and whose labor makes possible the illusion that one man can control a world. Roger Broy will go on to build the locomotives for Disneyland. His skill will help create the railroad that encircles the Magic Kingdom. Thomas the gardener will work at Carolwood until the railroad closes in 1953. Then he will find another estate, another lawn, another invisible job. Margaret the housekeeper will serve the Disney family for years, keeping their home spotless, their lives comfortable. They will never be famous. But without them, the Carolwood Pacific would never have run at all. And then, in early 1953, the illusion shatters. Not from worker rebellion, not from financial collapse, but from something Walt never anticipated, a moment of lost control that will end everything he has built. Early 1953. A visitor whom Walt has allowed to drive the Lilybell takes a curve too fast. The locomotive derails, falling onto its side. The whistle breaks. A jet of hot steam shoots across the ground. A 5-year-old girl runs through the steam jet before anyone can stop her. She suffers minor burns on her legs. The injuries are not serious. The girl recovers quickly. But for Walt, the incident changes everything. He has spent years building this railroad to bring happiness to people. He has watched children shriek with delight as the Lilybell pulls them through his tunnel, over his bridges, around his perfectly controlled world. The thought that it has hurt a child, even slightly, is unbearable. This is exactly what Walt has been trying to escape his entire life. The moment when control slips. When the thing you have built with your own hands betrays you. When paradise proves it was never really yours to command. Marceline taught him that lesson when he was 9. The Oswald betrayal taught him again when he was 26. And now, at age 51, his own railroad teaches him a third time. Control is an illusion. Within days, he makes a decision. The railroad will close. No more visitors. No more parties. No more children riding through the tunnels and over the bridges. The Lilybell is packed up and sent to storage at the studio's machine shop, where Roger Broe will maintain it, hoping someday it might run again. The tracks remain in place for several more years, but they carry no trains. The barn stands empty. The tunnel beneath Lillian's roses becomes just a hollow space underground, no longer an escape route, just an architectural curiosity. Walt's sanctuary has become just another building. The dream, it seems, is over. Thomas the gardener still arrives 6 days a week. He still mows the lawns, tends Lillian's roses, maintains the 5 acres. But now he no longer walks the railroad track each morning, checking for debris. He no longer clears the tunnel drainage after rain. The invisible machine keeps running, but the illusion it maintained is gone. Margaret, the housekeeper, still serves dinner at 7:30 sharp. The cook still prepares Walt's meals. The maintenance man still repairs whatever breaks. But the house feels different now, quieter, as if something essential has been removed. Walt comes home from the studio each night. He walks past the silent tracks. He glances at the empty barn. He knows the tunnel is still there, beneath Lillian's flowers, but he no longer descends into its darkness. The escape route is closed, but Walt Disney is never a man to let a dream die completely. Even as he closes down his backyard railroad, his mind is already racing ahead to something bigger, something that will take everything he has learned from the Carolwood Pacific and multiply it 1,000 times over. He has spent years sitting on park benches, watching his daughters ride merry-go-rounds, wishing there was a place where families could have adventures together. Now he knows what that place will look like. We'll have trains, long trains that circle an entire kingdom, trains with tunnels, just like his backyard. Trains that carry guests away from the ordinary world into a space where fantasy becomes absolute. It will have magic, and it will be called Disneyland. The closure of the Carolwood Pacific might have seemed like the end of Walt's dream, but in truth, it is only the beginning. Every lesson he has learned from his miniature railway, every joy he has experienced watching children ride through his property, every technical challenge he has overcome, all of it is being stored away for a project that will reshape the entertainment industry forever. Walt actually considers moving his Carolwood Pacific Railroad to the new park. One concept shows the Lilybell carrying passengers past miniature towns and settings, a direct continuation of what he has built in his backyard. But as the plans evolve, Walt realizes he needs something bigger. The railroad at Disneyland will not be a miniature. It will be a real narrow-gauge steam railway encircling the entire park, creating a boundary between the magic inside and the ordinary world outside. Roger Broe, the same man who helped build the Lilybell, is put in charge of the new locomotives. He takes the blueprints they used for Walt's backyard train and enlarges them to create full-sized working engines. The first locomotive, named the CK Holiday, bears a striking resemblance to the Lily Bell. It is as if Walt's backyard dream has simply grown up and moved to Anaheim. The Carolwood Pacific taught Walt something crucial. That paradise requires control. That control requires architecture. And that architecture can create escape, at least for a while. Disneyland will be that architecture, scaled up to accommodate not just Walt's family and friends, but millions of visitors each year. A theme park is just a massive escapism machine, a place where everyone can disappear into Walt's tunnel, emerge into his vision, ride his rails. Control the experience, absolutely. And when it fails, when accidents happen, when reality intrudes, you simply close that section of the park and rebuild it. The Backyard Railroad taught Walt all of this. The tunnel beneath Lillian's roses was always the prototype. But even as Disneyland rises in Anaheim, even as Walt builds his empire of controlled fantasy on an ever larger scale, time itself remains beyond his control. And time, as always, is running out. The 1950s and early 1960s are years of triumph. Disneyland exceeds every expectation. By its first anniversary, more than 3 million guests have passed through its gates. The railroad that circles the park, the spiritual descendant of the Carolwood Pacific, becomes one of its most beloved attractions. The studio produces classics: Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, Mary Poppins, which will win 5 Academy Awards. Walt expands into television with programs that bring his name into living rooms across America. The Mickey Mouse Club, Disneyland, The Wonderful World of Color. He collects Academy Award after Academy Award, eventually winning 22 Oscars, more than any other individual in history. And through it all, the house on Carolwood Drive remains his refuge. Back at 355 North Carolwood, life settles into a new rhythm. The tracks still wind through the property, even though no trains run on them. Walt has removed the Lily Bell, but he cannot bring himself to tear up the rails. They remain as a reminder of what had been, and perhaps as a promise of what might someday return. Lillian's gardens continue to flourish. The tunnel that caused so much negotiation still passes beneath her flowers. Empty now, but still structurally sound, still waiting in the darkness. Thomas the gardener still arrives 6 days a week, maintaining the grounds. Margaret the housekeeper still keeps the house spotless. The invisible machine continues running, even without trains to maintain. Walt and Lillian celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary in 1955 with a party at Disneyland, just days before the park opens to the public. 300 friends gather in Frontierland, riding the Mark Twain riverboat, watching entertainment at the Golden Horseshoe Saloon. At the end of the evening, Walt climbs onto the stage and dances with Lillian while the band plays. Their daughter Diane will later say she has never seen her father happier. The Carolwood home is where Walt returns each night after those long days of building an empire, where he reads scripts and reviews storyboards, where he plays with his grandchildren as they begin to arrive, where he and Lillian sit together after dinner, watching television, enjoying the simple companionship of a marriage that has lasted through poverty and success, through triumph and heartbreak, through decades of relentless ambition and quiet moments of peace. By the mid-1960s, Walt is busier than ever. He is overseeing construction of a new Disneyland in Florida, a project even more ambitious than the original. He is developing a ski resort in the Sierra Nevada mountains. He is planning renovations to expand Disneyland in Anaheim. And at the heart of the Florida project is something he calls Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. It is to be more than a theme park. It is to be an actual city, a living laboratory for new ideas in urban planning and technology. Walt believes it could change how people live. This is his final attempt at control. Not just a railroad in his backyard, Not just a theme park in Anaheim, but an entire city, designed from scratch, where every element can be managed, every variable anticipated, every moment of chaos engineered into order. But time, which Walt has always tried to outrun, is finally catching up. Walt Disney has been a heavy smoker since his days as an ambulance driver in France during the First World War. He smokes constantly, often going through several packs a day. He does not use filters. He has also suffered injuries from playing polo years earlier, damage to his neck and spine that causes him chronic pain. By the fall of 1966, these problems combine into something far more serious. In early November, Walt goes to St. Joseph's Hospital for what he thinks will be routine surgery on his cervical vertebrae. The neck pain has become unbearable. His doctors want to relieve the pressure on his spine. But during the preoperative examination, an X-ray reveals something terrible. There is a tumor on his left lung, the size of a walnut. The doctor says it needs to come out immediately. On November 6, 1966, surgeons remove most of Walt's left lung. The procedure is extensive, but Walt's initial concern is simply how it will affect his breathing. He does not yet understand how serious his condition truly is. After the surgery, his doctors take Lillian aside and deliver the devastating news. The cancer has already spread to his lymph nodes and other parts of his body. Walt has perhaps 6 months to 2 years to live. The family makes a decision not to tell Walt the full truth. They hope that treatment might slow the disease, might give him more time. Cobalt therapy begins almost immediately, but the treatments leave Walt weak and exhausted. He struggles to return to work. He can barely make it through Thanksgiving dinner with his family. The man who has seemed inexhaustible, who has built an empire through sheer force of will, is fading. Walt spends his final weeks moving between the hospital and his home on Carolwood Drive. When he is at the house, he tries to rest. He looks out at the gardens Lillian has cultivated for nearly 2 decades. He thinks about Epcot, sketching ideas on whatever paper is nearby. He refuses to give up on his dreams, even as his body fails him. The tunnel beneath Lillian's roses is still there, 90 feet of curved darkness passing under the flowers. But Walt does not descend into it anymore. The escape route no longer works. You cannot disappear underground when death is already inside you. Architecture, it turns out, cannot save you from everything. On November 30th, Walt returns to St. Joseph's Hospital. His condition has deteriorated significantly. He is weak, confused at times, struggling to eat. But even in those final days, he cannot stop planning. According to those who are present, Walt spends hours with his brother Roy, pointing at the ceiling tiles above his hospital bed and using them as a grid to map out the layout of his Florida project. He is literally planning Epcot on his deathbed. This is the pathology at its purest. Even when control of his own body is slipping away, Walt is still trying to design a world where everything can be managed, where chaos can be defeated, where paradise can be engineered. The tunnel taught him nothing. Or perhaps it taught him everything, and he simply cannot accept the lesson. On the morning of December 15, 1966, 10 days after his 65th birthday, Walter Elias Disney dies of acute circulatory collapse caused by lung cancer. The news spreads around the world within hours. Newspapers that once featured his creations on their front pages now announce his passing. At Disneyland, the flag is lowered to half-staff. And at 355 North Carolwood Drive, Lillian Disney begins a new chapter of her life. The chapter she will live alone. Walt's funeral is small and private, exactly as he would have wanted. He has always hated funerals, hated public displays of grief. He is cremated 2 days after his death. His ashes are interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. There is no public memorial service. The man who spent his life in the spotlight chooses to leave it quietly. The world mourns in ways both public and private. Tributes pour in from every corner of the entertainment industry. Television commentator Eric Severide captures the sentiment of millions when he says simply, "We will never see his like again." Presidents and prime ministers offer condolences. Animators and artists who have worked alongside Walt for decades find themselves unable to speak. The man who gave the world Mickey Mouse, Snow White, and Disneyland is gone. At the studio, work continues because that is what Walt would have wanted. The Jungle Book is still in production. The Happiest Millionaire is being finished. But something has changed. The creative force that has driven the company for 4 decades is no longer there to make the final decisions, to push for perfection, to dream the impossible into reality. In the months that follow, rumors begin to circulate about what really happened to Walt Disney. The most persistent is the claim that he has been cryogenically frozen, his body preserved in a metal cylinder somewhere beneath Disneyland, waiting for the day when science can cure his cancer and bring him back to life. The story is completely false. Walt's daughter Diane eventually addresses it directly. "There is absolutely no truth to the rumor that my father wished to be frozen," she says. His death certificate confirms he was cremated. His ashes remain at Forest Lawn, not beneath the Pirates of the Caribbean. But the rumors speak to something deeper. They reveal how difficult it is for people to accept that Walt Disney is truly gone. He has created so much magic, brought so much joy, seemed so eternal in his vision and energy. How can such a man simply die like anyone else? The cryogenic myth is a way of believing that the dream could continue, that Walt is just sleeping, waiting for his moment to return. That control, somehow, can defeat even death. It cannot. The tunnel beneath Lillian's roses remains. The tracks remain. The red barn stands empty. But the man who built them is gone. And Lillian is left alone in the house where they dreamed together. She will stay in that house for 31 more years, 3 decades of living with ghosts. And when she finally leaves, the house itself will face its own death sentence. Lillian remains in the Carolwood home. For 31 years after Walt's death, she lives at 355 North Carolwood Drive, keeping vigil over a house that has become a monument. She lives there through the completion of Walt Disney World in 1971, a project her brother-in-law Roy sees through in Walt's memory. She lives there through the opening of Epcot in 1982, a version of Walt's vision that is different from what he had planned, but still carries his spirit. She watches the company her husband founded grow into one of the largest entertainment conglomerates in the world, and she watches it struggle through periods of creative stagnation before finding its footing again. The house changes very little during those decades. Lillian is not interested in major renovations. She keeps the gardens, she keeps the memories. The tunnel that Walt built beneath her flowers still stands, even though no trains have passed through it in years. The tracks are finally removed in 1964, donated to the Los Angeles Live Steamers Club. But the tunnel remains, a hidden monument to a husband's devotion and a wife's compromise. 90 feet of curved darkness beneath the roses, serving no purpose now except to remember. The escapism machine has become a tomb. Thomas the gardener continues to arrive, year after year, maintaining the 5 acres. He no longer checks the railroad tracks each morning, but he tends Lillian's roses with the same care he always has. Margaret the housekeeper keeps the house spotless, even though only one person lives in it now. The invisible hands continue their work, maintaining an illusion that no longer needs maintaining. Paradise without a king. Control without anything to control. In 1969, 3 years after Walt's death, Lillian remarries. Her new husband is John Truyans, a Southern California real estate developer. It is a quiet union, far from the spotlight. Truyans moves into the Carolwood home, and they live there together until his death in 1981. After that, Lillian is alone again. Alone in the house where she and Walt raised their daughters, where they built a railroad, where they dreamed impossible dreams, where Walt would disappear into a tunnel beneath her garden, trying to escape the pressures of an empire. The tunnel is still there, empty, waiting for a train that will never return. Lillian becomes a philanthropist in her later years, using the fortune Walt left to support causes she believes in. In 1987, she pledges $50 million toward the construction of a new concert hall in Los Angeles. It will take years to complete, but the Walt Disney Concert Hall eventually opens in 2003, a stunning work of architecture designed by Frank Gehry. Lillian also supports the California Institute of the Arts, a school Walt had been instrumental in founding. And in 1996, she donates $100,000 to help the Nez Perce tribe in Idaho purchase back their ancestral artifacts. It is a nod to her own roots, to the state where she was born and where she married the man who changed her life. When asked about her marriage, Lillian always speaks with love and gratitude. "We shared a wonderful, exciting life," she says in a rare public statement. "And we loved every minute of it. He was a wonderful husband to me and a wonderful and joyful father and grandfather." It is a simple summary of 41 years together, but it captures something essential. Theirs had been a true partnership, a Hollywood marriage that defied the odds. But even true partnerships end. On December 15, 1997, exactly 31 years to the day after Walt's death, Lillian Disney suffers a stroke at her Carolwood home. She dies the following morning, December 16th. She is 98 years old. Like Walt, she is cremated. Her ashes are interred at Forest Lawn, just below her husband's, reuniting them in death as they had been joined in life. With Lillian's passing, the story of the Disney family at Carolwood Drive comes to an end. The house stands empty now. The gardens that Lillian cultivated for nearly 5 decades begin to grow wild without her care. The tunnel beneath the roses remains, a concrete curve passing through darkness, serving no purpose, remembered by no one who lives there. Thomas the gardener is no longer needed. Margaret the housekeeper packs her belongings. The invisible machine, after 47 years of operation, finally shuts down. The escapism machine Walt built has outlived everyone who understood what it was for. And now it waits for whatever comes next. What comes next is Gabriel Brenner, and what he brings is not preservation, but erasure. The story we began with in the rain of 2001, the demolition that will wipe away 50 years of memory in less than a week. The family sells the property in 1998 to Gabriel Brenner, an investor who pays approximately $8.5 million for the estate, roughly $16 million in today's money for a piece of Disney history. Brenner has hoped to raise his children in the home where Walt Disney lived. But when he examines the structure closely, he discovers serious problems. Leaded pipes, asbestos, structural damage accumulated over nearly 50 years. The house, he concludes, cannot be saved. We have already witnessed what happens next: the demolition, the erasure, the 35,000-square-foot monument to excess that replaces 500 square feet of memory. But Brenner keeps a few things. The original entrance gate, part of Lillian's rose garden, and most importantly, the tunnel. The 90-foot curved tunnel that Walt built beneath his wife's flowers still stands, buried beneath the new landscaping. Its entrance is marked by a small stone archway covered in ivy, with the year 1950 carved into the keystone. It is a quiet memorial to the railroad that once circled the property and to the man who built it. The escapism machine, reduced to a single architectural artifact, a curve of concrete passing through darkness, serving no purpose now except to remember. The barn is saved too, but not by Brenner. Before the demolition, Walt's eldest daughter, Diane, arranges for the red barn to be rescued. It is an act of love and preservation. A daughter's determination to save a piece of her father's legacy from the wrecking ball. With the help of the Carolwood Foundation and contractor Bill Owell, the barn is carefully disassembled, each board numbered and cataloged, transported to Griffith Park in Los Angeles, reassembled at the Los Angeles Live Steamers Railroad Museum. The process takes months of careful work, but when it is complete, Walt's sanctuary has been reborn in a new location. Today it stands there as a museum, open to visitors on the third Sunday of every month. Inside, you can see the workbench where Walt crafted parts for his trains. You can examine the tools he used, still arranged, much as he left them. You can stand in the space where he escaped from the pressures of running an empire. You can touch a piece of the dream. The Lily Bell locomotive finds a different home after decades in storage. It is restored and placed on permanent display at the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco. The museum is founded by Diane Disney Miller and opens in 2009, 43 years after her father's death. The Lily Bell sits in Gallery 9, surrounded by freight cars and the caboose that Walt built with his own hands. The interior of the caboose still features the miniature details he added: a tiny potbelly stove, a calendar hung on the wall. It is a monument to craftsmanship, to patience, to the joy of creating something beautiful, but also to something else, to the need for control, to the architecture of escape, to the tunnel beneath the roses that taught Walt how to disappear. In 2014, the Carolwood property sells again, this time for $74 million. The buyer is an international investor who reportedly appreciates the connection to Disney history. The stone archway with the 1950 inscription still stands, the last physical remnant of Walt's backyard railroad visible to the world. Everything else he and Lillian built over 50 years is gone. The gardens, the house, the screening room where Walt watched dailies, the kitchen where Lillian prepared meals for her family, the bedroom where she lived alone for 3 decades after her husband died. All of it erased, replaced by something bigger and grander, but infinitely less meaningful. And yet, the legacy endures. Every day, millions of people visit Disneyland and Walt Disney World. They ride the railroads that Walt dreamed into existence, trains that trace their lineage directly back to the Lily Bell and the Carolwood Pacific. They walk down Main Street, USA, a recreation of the Marceline, Missouri that shaped Walt's childhood. They experience attractions that began as sketches on Walt's desk, refined during those long evenings at his Carolwood home. The empire he built continues to grow, touching new generations who never knew the man but feel his presence in every carefully designed detail. The Carolwood Pacific Railroad was more than a hobby. It was the seed from which an entire philosophy of entertainment grew. Walt learned from his backyard trains that the journey matters as much as the destination, that landscapes should be designed to tell stories, that even the smallest details contribute to the magic. But he learned something else too, something darker. He learned that paradise requires control, that control requires architecture, and that architecture can create escape, at least temporarily. The tunnel beneath Lillian's roses was not just a compromise to save her garden. It was a prototype, a template, a proof of concept. When Walt designed Disneyland, he insisted that the railroad include tunnels, long ones, dark ones, tunnels that take guests away from the ordinary world into a space where fantasy becomes absolute. Every Disney park that followed inherited this obsession: the tunnels, the controlled environments, the carefully engineered escape from reality. Carolwood taught Walt that you can build a machine to disappear into, and Disneyland proved you could scale that machine to accommodate millions. A theme park is just a massive escapism machine, an architectural response to the chaos of the world, a place where control is possible, where every variable is anticipated, where paradise can be engineered. Until it cannot. Until accidents happen. Until people get hurt. Until the illusion shatters and you are forced to confront the truth that control was always temporary. Walt Disney died, believing his greatest work was still ahead of him. Epcot, his experimental city, was never built as he envisioned it. The Florida project became a theme park, not a functioning community. The ski resort in the Sierra Nevada was abandoned. The man who could never stop dreaming was stopped by time itself. But perhaps that is the nature of true visionaries. They see further than one lifetime can reach. They plant seeds whose full flowering they will never witness. The house at 355 North Carolwood Drive stands today as something entirely different from what Walt and Lillian built. The tunnel remains hidden and silent, its archway a quiet monument to a marriage and a dream. The tracks are long gone, donated and dispersed. The barn has been moved and transformed into a museum. The locomotive sits behind glass in San Francisco, beautiful and still, never again to feel the fire in its belly or the wind in its whistle. But on certain days, when the light falls just right through the eucalyptus trees of Holmby Hills, you can almost imagine a different scene. A man in casual clothes sitting on the tender of a miniature train, chugging through his backyard while his wife tends her garden and his daughters wave from the porch. Steam rising into the California sky. Laughter echoing across manicured lawns. A dreamer in his element, building joy one careful detail at a time. That man is gone now. The home he built is gone. The railroad he loved is scattered across museums and memory. But the psychology that drove him persists. The need for control. The architecture of escape. The tunnel into darkness where no one can follow. That is what Carolwood really was. Not a house, not a railroad. An escapism machine, built by a man who spent his life trying to outrun chaos, only to discover that chaos always wins in the end. The trains no longer run at Carolwood Drive. But if you visit Disneyland, if you board that railroad and pass through those tunnels, you are riding Walt's dream in its final form. The Carolwood Pacific, scaled up and made eternal. The tunnel beneath the roses, now circling an entire kingdom. And somewhere in the darkness you can still hear what Walt was really building all along. Not just trains, not just theme parks, a place to disappear. If you have enjoyed this deep investigation into the architecture and psychology of the Disney family estate, please like, subscribe, and explore more stories of history's most fascinating buildings. Each one tells a story not just about wealth, but about the minds that created them and the invisible hands that made them possible. Thank you for watching.